Before watching Geologic Time,
Time. Human beings measure it in seconds, minutes, hours. We count days and years. From an individual human point of view, the most significant period of time is a lifetime. From our first breath to our last, we live on average 75 years. That's time on a human scale. Human history refers to much longer periods of time than just one individual's life. In fact, it sometimes refers to many human lifetimes. But these human-centered time scales are inadequate to describe the history of Earth. Our planet was formed 4.6 billion years ago. To describe and to organize events in its past, Earth scientists or geologists use what's known as geologic time. Geologic time deals with periods much longer than human lifespans. But how do geologists know what happened on Earth millions or billions of years ago? They study what's happening on our planet today. The process is taking place now. Volcanic activity, shifts in Earth's crust, and erosion from water and wind are the same processes that have been present throughout much of Earth's history. One example is the volcanic eruption off the coast of Iceland in 1963. Lava flowed for one full year. The result? A brand new island called Surtsey, created through the same processes that formed much of Earth's surface in the distant past. Geologists have two scales by which to measure geologic time. These are relative time and absolute time. Relative time deals with the sequencing of events, the order in which things happen. For instance, which came first? The woolly mammoth, the stegosaurus, or the trilobite? Relative time doesn't describe exactly when an event happened, but rather what came before it and what came after it. Relative dating provides a chronology. To determine the relative time of when an event happened or a particular organism lived, geologists study rocks. Earth's crust is made of many layers of rock. Usually the layers farthest from the surface are the oldest. The ones closest to the surface are the youngest. This is called the principle of superposition. Trapped inside many of the layers is evidence of organisms that existed at the time the rock was laid down, fossils. Scientists determine the relative age of an organism based on its position in the rock strata. That's relative time. Geologists also drill deep into Earth to take core samples of ancient rock layers. By analyzing the composition of thin slices of the cores, they can determine absolute time, or the actual age of the rock, and the organisms fossilized within it. They can establish absolute time by measuring the radioactive decay of certain chemical elements in rocks that break down or decay over time. Uranium is one example. It decays into lead. Scientists know the exact rate at which the decay occurs. By measuring the amount of uranium and the amount of lead, they can determine the age of the rock and the fossils within it. In this case, bacteria.
The fossil evidence in the most ancient rocks on Earth indicate that these types of organisms must have existed 3.7 billion years ago.
All living things contain a radioactive isotope known as carbon-14. Carbon-14 decays relatively quickly, so carbon dating generally is feasible only for organisms less than 50,000 years old. There is yet another way to establish absolute time, thanks to the glaciers that once covered much of the planet. As the glaciers advanced, they carved out huge depressions in the land. When the glaciers melted, the holes filled with water, creating lakes such as the Great Lakes of the Midwestern United States. Each year, a layer of sediment is deposited on the lake bottom. It is called a varve. The sediment deposited in summer is light-colored and coarse. Winter deposits are dark and fine-grained. Those differences make it easy to distinguish individual varves. Scientists count them to determine age.
Some of these tidal rock layers are just paper thin, and it's like each piece of paper is a story or page out of a diary telling what's happened a billion years ago.
Whether they're looking at varves or at fossils found in other sedimentary rocks, geologists are able to read the rocks and uncover the story of our planet. They translate geologic evidence into events and changes in Earth that happened millions, even billions of years ago. Revealing Earth's history makes digging in the dirt well worth the effort. Many scientists think that about 65 million years ago, a huge meteorite struck Earth with tremendous force. It created an enormous fireball and a thick cloud of dust and debris that spread across the planet, blocking the sun for months. 75% of all living things perished, including the dinosaurs. What proof do scientists have to support this theory? The evidence is found in rocks. Meteorites contain an element known as iridium. It's extremely rare to find iridium anywhere on Earth, except near the impact craters left behind by meteorites.
This is the Hoba iron meteorite in Namibia. It's the largest meteorite known on Earth. And like most meteorites, it contains the rare element iridium. And iridium has proven to be the clue, the connection between the impact event and the extinction of the dinosaurs.
That's because all over the world, high concentrations of iridium have been found in rock layers that are 65 million years old. That signals a geological event of global proportions. So geologists use the information found in rocks to piece together the history of our planet. A lot of that information comes from what's encased in the rocks, fossils. Fossils form only under certain conditions. Most organisms die and decay without leaving a trace of their existence. In rare cases, an entire animal is fossilized. This spider died after being trapped in the sticky sap of an ancient tree. When it hardened, the sap turned to amber. But in the vast majority of cases, an organism was fossilized because it was quickly buried in sediment after it died. That prevented predators from eating its remains. Over a long period of time, the sediment turned to rock, and the organism decayed. But it left behind a record in the sedimentary rock, often an imprint of its shape. In the case of animals, usually it's only the hard parts that are fossilized, such as bones, teeth, or shells. The softer parts likely decomposed. Sometimes both plant and animal fossils are found together. The remains of a woolly mammoth that lived 20,000 years ago were discovered frozen in the permafrost of the Siberian tundra. Scientists believe the remains were buried in mud, preserving parts of the animal shortly after it died. In the mammoth's fur, they found the remains of plants, roots, stems, and microscopic grains of pollen. From those bits of information, scientists draw conclusions about the plants that existed at the time and the climate. They create a snapshot of what life was like in that region 20,000 years ago. As geologists discover more fossils and continue to study the rocks that blanket Earth, our understanding of the planet grows. Piece by piece, we know more about the geological events of the past and the history of life on Earth.
Now that you've seen prehistoric life, talk about this. What is a fossil? How do fossils form?